Welcome back. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome back to the XDI Experience Live Show. Thanks for taking some time out of your increasingly busy schedule to be with us for around 45 minutes today. So we're going from last week's show where we covered the crazy and amazing world of nanocomposites that will be having a profound effect on our future lives, to today we jump into the consumer here and now and go transport and mobility. As we come through the pandemic, yes, we're talking sustainability and micro mobility. Let's go. Micro mobility. Look, the micro mobility sector took a real beating during the pandemic, with less people traveling, of course. However, there is a groundswell taking place created by this pandemic. A need for distancing, a need to take quick trips for convenience items, and even to have them delivered. As an example, according to a US micro-mobility company who remains nameless, but I'll let you have a guess, that rents e-scooters, the average trip distances have actually grown by 26% since the start of the pandemic, with rides in some cities such as Detroit increasing by up to 60%. At a more detailed level, some cities are also experiencing a shift in consumer use cases. For instance, in San Francisco, the lockdown has caused a pronounced shift towards runs to the pharmacy and trips to restaurants in order to pick up food. Today, like new automotive, it's an opportunity for growth, and yet for the less resilient, perhaps a time for some consolidation. Today, we're talking environmental transportation and mobility, and specifically micro-mobility. John Lee, Vice President of Product Development at Indigo Technology, is one of the new up-and-coming ACES vehicles. Take a listen to John as he draws from his multi-industry background in the CX, the consumer experience, and how he's applying that to this new and exciting world of automotive, autonomous, connected, electric, and subscription vehicles. Ready, set, let's go.
Over 30 years ago, Formula One had some of the most incredible technology the sport has ever seen. The cars had automatic, self-adjusting suspension that would move up and down to increase grip and performance. The system was the brainchild of famous designer Frank Durney and called active suspension. This, combined with the new traction control and semi-automatic gearboxes, made the 1992 Williams unstoppable. In fact, it still holds the record for the most dominant car in Formula One history.
Active suspension was banned from F1 in 1993. It was considered too dangerous for all the other cars without active suspension to chase Williams into the corners too fast to handle. Today, Indigo has invented robotic wheels with active suspension built in for no additional cost, enabling a whole new class of ultra-efficient and affordable light EVs with superior comfort and handling.
Hey, John, welcome back. How are you, sir?
Good. It's great to be back. Good to see you.
Good, you too. Last time we did this, you were in the middle of the pandemic with your mask on, with a couple of bags ready to escape because you got a big forest fire within about a mile of your home and your wife had you on standby. I'm guessing things have calmed down a little bit up there.
Well, unfortunately, it's drought conditions this year, as you probably see in Southern Cal as well. Yep. And the fires are just a reminder. They're just around the corner again, probably, and a reminder of how we are impacting the world we live in. So, yep. But fortunately, so far, no fires that I can see at this moment. So,
good. All righty. So today, John, we're going quick fire round, 3 minutes, 7-8 questions to put you under pressure for some quick responses. Then we're going into the main event. We're going to be talking about sustainability and micro mobility. And then we're going to round it all up So talk about Indigo Technologies, what it's all about, where it's going, what its future, what its challenges are. So hopefully you're up for that.
Sounds great.
Good. All right, so if you're ready, let's go quick fire round. Okay, let's start the clock. How did you get involved in the EV sector?
Well, I started to take notice of the EV sector when a lot of my friends from the mobility, the phone mobility world started to jump in. As people have said in the past, it seems like it's a phone on wheels. A lot of the systems are the same. And so I jumped in on the bandwagon, as it were, with SF Motors Now Series.
Got it. What advice would you give a young emerging talent who wants to be involved in new automotive product development?
I would say stay on top of the latest developments. It's an exciting new area with battery technology. It's just constantly evolving, getting more safe, getting more injury dense, with new players coming into the market, really disrupting how things are done. So I would say watch the latest trends and stay on top of it.
Got it. Yeah, a lot happening. What's the best and worst part of being in the electric vehicle sector?
I would say the best part is that there really is a desire to make the world a more sustainable, more green place. The worst part, however, is that there are still lots of challenges, especially, it's all driven on batteries to make emissions zero. However, the battery technology itself takes a lot of emissions to create. And what do you do with it 10 years down the road when the vehicles come out of service?
Yep. Got it. Okay. What's the first step you take in designing a new product?
I would say whether it's an electric vehicle or really any vehicle, it's about understanding those user needs, just so that at the end of the day, you really address something that is really needed and ultimately desired. Beyond that is we're also looking at, is it something that can be built? Is it feasible? And is it something you can make a business out of? Is it viable?
Got it. Okay. What are the most common mistakes you're seeing when designing an EV?
I think the biggest mistake is thinking you're there to just simply replace what was once there. If you look at gas vehicles today, it's about the performance, the speed, the range, and to try to just mimic that, I think is a lost opportunity if nothing else.
Okay. What technology is having the greatest impact on new automotive today?
I would say definitely the battery side of things and AI and machine learning for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Wildcard, if you could buy a new automotive ACES vehicle, what would it be and why? Maybe what would it be first?
Yeah, I think it would be a Tesla, simply because they're so far ahead of the curve in terms of just their iterations and their development.
Got it. Which organization today do you most admire when it comes to the CX?
I would say non-automotive side, it would be companies like Disney and other sort of hotels, because they really focus on those brands. On the user experience. Whereas the automotive side, I think, I would say Lucid. They seem to really design the whole vehicle around the cabin experience. So that looks very exciting. Waiting to see and use one.
Yeah, I'm going to say, I think if they were out, maybe you might have picked them as your vehicle today rather than a Tesla, just because they're doing so much. Or maybe even an Audi e-tron, or if you were feeling, big checkbook, a Porsche Taycan or something. I don't know. There we go.
While those are exciting, I would have to say that the battery usage is still replacing the gas guzzler. So I would really be torn to really think about, do I really want something that requires such a big battery? Because
the footprint.
The footprint, exactly. Carbon emissions that result from that. So.
Yeah, I get you. I get it. Okay. Thanks, John. Let's move to the main event. Okay, so we're here really today, John, to talk about two major subjects going on in the transport and mobility sector that have both had the greatest focus over the last 15, 18 months, care of the pandemic: environmentalism and micro mobility. The greenhouse gases disappeared overnight. And I always say this, I never forget that picture over Naples, Italy, where one day there was all the smog and the cloud. And then the next day, as the factories turned off and the people stopped traveling, suddenly you could see Naples, Italy and Mount Everest and all these other things that were claimed. But did anyone actually notice And with social distancing, who wants to take public transport any longer? Tell us what you're seeing in both those respects.
I mean, it was phenomenal to talk about a worldwide experiment to say what would happen if we suddenly stopped commuting. And from villages in India being able to see Mount Everest that they had never seen before to Beijing skies bluer than blue can be. So in that sense, it's been a phenomenal experiment, unfortunately at the cost of many, many lives lost. But the exciting part of it, if there was a silver lining to any of it, is really questioning sort of how we live and how we work. And I think that the opportunity to really transform. I mean, nowadays you see employers starting to say, hey, you don't have to come back to the office if you don't need to, because we've actually survived this year working remotely. And so I think the benefits of not having travel is going to be seen. I mean, I've maybe only filled my car up 3 times all of last year because I wasn't having to travel anywhere. So in that sense, it's definitely changing our behavior, changing our habits. And I think hopefully some of these will stick. And the question is, I mean, I think one of the things I saw also was that not only do animals start to roam the streets freely because there's no one there to compete with them, but even people are roaming the streets. In my neighborhood, I saw first few weeks, months after the lockdown, people were starting to walk the streets with their family. Hopefully those things will change, although I think
are they still doing it?
Yeah, I was going to say, unfortunately, I see a little less of it today because things are starting to unlock, right? So it's
gone back to type. Okay,
yeah,
got it. So are you actually seeing those habits sticking, or do you think people are just going to slide back to how we were before of just get in the vehicle to go to the grocery store rather than walk or bike or take a micro-mobility vehicle? Are you seeing those things sticking around?
Yeah, well, so I think you do see some of that stuff sticking because, again, a lot of employers are starting to say that we can work remotely. Unfortunately, though, I see 101, 280 around me starting to really get to be busy again at 4 or 5 in the afternoon, for instance. So, unfortunately, there's still a need to go places. There's still a need to transport ourselves. And the question is, how can we start to see some of these alternatives? On the other hand, I do see great sort of press releases saying that cities like Paris and across the U.S., across the world, starting to adopt more bike lanes, starting to really offer these alternatives to having to jump in a gas vehicle. So,
Yep, got it. Okay, so let's look at the challenges environmentally and for micro-mobility. For now, battery technology is generally modularized. We pack them separate packs and tend to be always built around lithium ion. What are the problems associated with delivering environmental micro-mobility transport?
Yeah, I think that the challenges that are there, as you mentioned, on the one hand, the batteries that power these things are not necessarily environmentally friendly in terms of the carbon emissions required to make one of these things, as well as to ultimately deliver it in the vehicles. The other thing about the vehicles is that I would say the challenges of those vehicles is that it's not necessarily accessible to all. You really need things such as mobile phones to access them, and so there's lots of still challenges with these micromobility solutions that if it's really a global sort of democratized solution, still a lot of things stand in its way. So,
yep. Okay, got it. So, just dealing with the macro drivers of convenience versus micromobility, potentially, speed and all those things. I believe we tend to do far more to avoid pain than we do to necessarily gain pleasure, and therefore, while I know we're not expecting 100% of people to convert to micromobility, doesn't the ability that vehicle has a status still. It's still got an image to be driving the right thing. On top of that, there's also the perception of driving the big SUV that makes you feel safe. So how does micromobility kind of deal with that, and how does that affect growth trajectory?
Yeah, great question. I think that the reality is that we use the right tool for the right problem or the right challenge. And so what I mean by that is if you think about where is it that micromobility, let's say defined as scooters and bikes and these types of smaller vehicles.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So where do they really have its place? And I would say if you look at cities of a certain urban density, only then, for instance, it doesn't make sense to jump in your SUV to go around the corner to pick up, as you were saying at the beginning of the show, the prescription drugs or the meal. But instead, whether you walk, maybe it takes a little longer. Ideally, you maybe have a bike or a scooter to get you there a little bit faster and coming back. Whereas these types of devices to try to go in the suburbs a few miles down the road to that local pharmacy is probably not quite the right solution. However, on the other side, an SUV, while it does give you sort of the safety, but in some ways, it's not necessarily the most responsible way. So maybe you're safe, but what if you wind up crushing other people in the process? Also, more importantly, is that an SUV is the challenge is that it really does take a lot of resources, whether it's the consumption of fuels to get from point A to point B, or if you start to see the SUVs, as I was mentioning before, the battery-powered SUVs, the batteries are so large and so massive and such a huge carbon impact that we have to really start to question our personal choices to say, how do we make less of an impact on the environment?
Got it. Okay, so you're kind of directly confronting the existing EV that's out there and how environmentally friendly is it. I get it from a initial purchase perspective. So let's talk about solutions in delivering more environmentally friendly transport and micromobility. How do we overcome the lithium-ion battery problem? How do we deliver a micromobility solution when so many of us are status symbol orientated or even price sensitive to go micromobility? Public transport or micromobility as a service may be expensive. So how do you deal with the battery problem? How do you deal with price issues?
Yeah, fortunately, the battery problem, I think, is one of those things that can be solved. Whether it's going with sort of newer methods to produce these batteries, which maybe doesn't require the drying, which is a big part of the carbon emission a contributor, to then how do you, today you see news all the time about these batteries exploding or burning, et cetera. And so making them more safe, going to solid state. I believe that given enough time, these challenges will be solved. If you think about it, really the batteries that we are seeing in electric vehicles today has only developed over the past few years. And so whether we go to new materials or new processes, I firmly believe there's an opportunity that we will see us solving those challenges.
As you say, it's still in its infancy, isn't it? And even now we've got people like the Japanese developing sodium ion. We've got global initiatives on graphene ion, zinc ion batteries as an environmentally better way to go from a carbon footprint perspective. Anyways, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. So I think from the battery side, we'll see continued improvement. And so in that sense, I'm very, very hopeful.
Yep, got it. So what about the kind of price side of things? If you go mobility as a service, how do we start to bring those prices down? I think people will pay a premium for getting what they want when they want, but I'm not sure what the tolerance is. What are you seeing there?
Absolutely. I think that you will always have a market for the luxury vehicles of the world. However, unless you're in that sort of top 1%, the rest of us, in many ways, still need to get around. And how does the exciting thing about EVs that I really appreciate is that it's simplified the automobile. No longer are you dealing with all of the drivetrain and so many other parts of the carbon emission and so on and so forth of the internal combustion engine. Instead, it's now a simplified vehicle, a simplified way to get around. But it's not quite affordable for everybody. And so I think that as the batteries continue to develop, prices will come down, the vehicle architectures will continue to simplify and become more affordable. And so then the question becomes, to your question, is how soon till everybody can access an electric vehicle readily so that they can go about and do what they do. I mean, there's a concept such as called the car-based economy. Because of the car, you can live in suburbs. Because you have the car, you can commute to work. And so, how does electric vehicles start to really deliver on some of those for everybody? So.
Yeah, I remember when we've been chatting, you've often talked about the obsession with speed, the obsession with range, and Teslas have been built around that obsession in many respects. Whereas the reality of somebody in the US, they drive, I think it's 25, 26 miles per day as an average, but they're always thinking, what if I really need to have a fast vehicle because that's how I've been brought up. They're always thinking, maybe I want to go away for the weekend. And I guess the counter to that is to bring in a mobility as a solution option, whereby you can turn on your short range thing during the week and maybe get something long range delivered mobility as a service. I don't know. Is that a real option that's coming in?
For sure. I would say that kind of at the sort of your initial sort of quick fire round question is that you're right. I mean, the Tesla leading the way has been, and I think for their time period in the development of these electric vehicles really did need to say we are a replacement of the gas guzzler. The expectations of going 0 to 60 in the blink of an eye, to be able to go 400 or 500 or further sort of on one quote unquote tank of gas. And so the unfortunate thing, though, is, as I was saying, that really does kind of impact the size of the battery and everything that goes along with that. The cost, a third of the vehicle's cost is the battery itself. It's heavy and so on and so forth. So as we start to think about how do we make these vehicles more sustainable, more efficient, it's about lightweighting them. And to that regard, how do you then have the range that you would expect? And I think that, as you were saying, all of one of the exciting things is that OEMs around the world are seeing that mobility as a service is something that they really need to start to consider and think about how to offer. And I think people do see that the need for being able to go a little bit longer. And so I think innovative ways, whether you go and trade in your vehicle for the weekend, whether you are able to swap out your battery pack quickly, there are ways of trying to address this range issue. But you're right. I mean, I think most people only ever commute but the 5, 10, 15 miles round trip on the daily side, such that you can charge at home, you can charge at the place of work or where you're going. So I think that our habits and how we think about the need to go far. One last quick one. What's really interesting is that in China, the Wuling Hongguan Mini EV is outselling the Tesla. The Tesla Model 3 has got its range. The Wuling Hongguan is only something a few 100 or so kilometers, which is nothing. But people are buying these things like hotcakes. One is because it's affordable, and then two is because they don't really need to go that far. And there's other ways to go that far on the weekend, for instance. So I think it should be pretty exciting to see how things evolve.
Yeah, that makes me wonder, and I hate to generalize, but I mean, that makes me wonder, it's the difference between the person who's in the US, where you're taking away from them the status symbol and the knee jerk is to hold on to it, versus someone in an rapidly emerging economy saying, maybe this is my first vehicle. So you're not taking anything. In fact, what you're doing is you're giving them something, and it's wholly more practical. I don't know. Maybe that's a factor as well.
I think one quick thought is that the car culture in the U.S. is very strong, and as you see it from movies to everything around us, and so it's easy to gravitate to wanting to hold on to things that we know and are familiar with. However, the Gen Z are starting to get used to the point where I don't need a vehicle. I simply need a way to get from point A to point B. And there are other ways to use that time and energy. And I mean, with a car, you have to worry about the maintenance, the parking, and all these sort of changing tires, so on and so forth. Why bother driving? Why not have someone drive for me? And so I think in that sense, mentalities are shifting. And so I think it'll be interesting. Yeah. Yeah,
really, really interesting. We can go on. Let's talk about the future of micro mobility, short term, 2 to 5 years, medium term, maybe 5 to 10, and then get the crystal ball out. What do you see as the future?
For sure. I think that the next 2 to 5 years, we will probably see a lot more micromobility solutions available. I think in the past few years, especially before COVID, municipalities, governments running sort of cities were quite weary to avoid what happened in China, which is having tried to go from the subway stop in Shanghai to, let's say, the office I was trying to visit, and having to literally do a little hurdle exercise to jump through and pass these bicycles that were littered across the sidewalk. So to avoid those types of really irresponsible sort of way of rolling out a service, municipalities are starting to say, you know what, let's take our time, let's make these providers have to require a permit so we can then better manage and make these solutions available and really improve the lives of people living in our cities. So I think in the next 2 to 5 years, and with COVID, we already started to see that there is more of an embracing, because we've kind of started to figure out how to make these things more efficient. And for instance, you incentivize people to park in the right spot, or maybe you charge them extra to have someone to go and move it for you, because again, try to make these things a better part of our solution. So beyond that, I would say that in the next 5 years, I think it's really about 5 to 10 years. I think the robotaxis are getting quite exciting. As you see the announcements, Cruise and a couple of these other companies in the Bay Area especially, they're already starting to operate these sort of these robotaxi services within a certain block radius as they start to figure out all the edge cases and figure out how that works. And I think that the next 5 to 10 years, that will only increase in range and scope. And I think that should be quite exciting to see how that evolves. And then finally, I would say from the 10-year and out range, I'm really excited about these electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles, electric sort of flying personal transport. Because to really be able to, from my house, to jump over to Santa Cruz, spend a day at the beach in just a few minutes flight time, or to jump to Tahoe in 30 minutes or so flight time, I think that should be extremely exciting to see. And also see how it changes the way we transport things as well. I think it's really exciting, as you see now with UPS and others starting to use drones for delivery. And so it's really going to change the way as we get more mature with these technologies.
Amazing. Good. Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Let's jump to audience. Let's see what questions we've got coming in. Take the first one from Elena. How quick before mobility as a service takes hold and we can get what we want when we want?
Well, I think mobility as a service has already taken hold in many ways in terms of just the as defined as the Uber and Lyft services, the DoorDashes and Postmates and whatever else. So I think that however, having said that, the challenge is, how do the people making these deliveries make enough to sustain their living? You see stories that after a month or two of driving for Uber or Lyft, people quit because they realize, oh my gosh, my car sort of maintenance is going through the roof, the fuel, and so on and so forth. And so it's about, how do we really make these tools that allow them to deliver these services more affordable? And so I think that, things that we're focused on and working on, actually.
Okay, good. Let's take the next one. What do we got? From Umi. If I buy a short-range vehicle, what do I do when I want to go away for the weekend?
Yeah, I think that everybody in the vehicle business we all want to get away as well. And so I think as we were saying earlier, the innovative ways of thinking about how do you swap out a vehicle or find other ways to get to your destination. I think that the exciting thing is, as you see with Tesla going direct to consumer, bypassing the whole dealership model altogether, with Volvo's having subscription service, these will enable the opportunity for you to have these new ways of interacting with the vehicle and getting what you need, a longer range or whatever else.
Or does it just go battery as a service?
Exactly. And there are companies trying to go after that as well. So
yeah, interesting. Okay, let's take the next one. What do we have from Umi again? Are we sure EVs versus hydrogen is the future?
So what's interesting about hydrogen is that there's actually still a battery in the vehicle.
Yeah.
So it's really about the electricity generation. Do you do it at the vehicle level, or do you do it on a larger scale and deliver just the electricity to the vehicle? And so I think that the promising thing about hydrogen is that the byproducts is just air and water. And so in that sense, hydrogen is a great technology. Now, and in terms of the worries about another Hindenburg going off because you have the hydrogen tank in your car going off, I'm less worried about that, because today, gas combustion engine, I mean, we are driving around with volatile liquids in our vehicle. So I'm not worried about that aspect. However, the challenge for hydrogen, I believe, is the distribution of that hydrogen. You have to build so much infrastructure to have the ability to have these hydrogen stations. So unfortunately, I think that is not going to allow hydrogen to really take off to any meaningful extent. Maybe in certain areas when you have a small city, state government where you're able to really just focus those resources. But I think from even with EV charging in the US, only recently, because of Biden's push to going to electric, is there networks of operators saying that, okay, we'll now form these electric charging stations. So for that to happen for hydrogen, it's unfortunately a little bit too much of an ask, in my opinion. So
because it's a massive ask for EVs as well. I mean, if you think it's going to be the fleets that go first, big semis that are EVs, the infrastructure needed to even charge those is going to be immense. So I mean, big stuff, especially in the US with such distances.
Actually, let me just add to quickly that one is that I think with autonomous trucks, you are starting to see that because of the economics of delivering goods across distances, it makes sense to have these expensive sensors on your vehicles to do those services. It's a different sort of calculation, different business case. I think actually hydrogen in the trucking industry may actually have some opportunity. So for mass consumer, hydrogen may be a challenge, but when you are talking about depots and building out the infrastructure of depots for these sort of trucks to operate, there may be enough savings and enough sort of much of a business case for trucking to adopt. So I think hydrogen is exciting in that sense. So we'll see how things develop.
Good plug for Nicola. Good for you. Good. Okay. Let's go next question. What do we got? From Javier. Thanks, Javier. Good to see you again. Is needed or exists some kind of government regulation for public micro mobility vehicles? So do we need any regulation for that?
Yeah, absolutely. As I was saying, that we don't want these things to make our lives more dangerous and inconvenient, right? It's whether people are trying to use the sidewalk to go down go on the sidewalk on their scooter at 15, 20 miles per hour and run into people. We don't want that to happen. And so fortunately, a lot of the governments are taking note and making their policies to be, I mean, everything from increasing and adding bike lanes to then governing the speed of these vehicles because you can when you go on non sort of permitted areas. So I think, it's definitely needed. And at least the exciting thing is that it is evolving quickly.
Great. Let's take one last one from Diraj. Diraj, how should electric vehicle technology companies target complex economies such as India?
Yes, that's I think that the challenge there is, and I'll be the first to admit, I don't understand the India sort of ecosystem environment that well. But generally speaking, I would say that the EV tech companies really need to consider multiple levels. One is from the sort of government policy level, and then ultimately to the infrastructure and back to the CX, the consumer experience of these things. One of the biggest reasons why people are saying that they are going back from electric vehicles back to ICE vehicles is because it's difficult and inconvenient to charge. And so to really have a successful business venture in any country would really be to understand and work with local governments, work with the partners, build that ecosystem to make that consumer experience of the electric vehicle, bar none, the best that's there, so that you have that strong adoption, especially if you're going for the consumer side.
Yeah, it's a big issue in a lot of these very rapidly emerging economies such as India, because it's not unusual for that macro psychology to say, okay, you're starting to make some money now. The first thing you need to do is go buy a car, and typically it's an ICE, and then it's go buy a house, and it's just how those economies are really being driven psychologically. So it's a big issue. Good question from Duraj. A very complex environment to be dealing with. Good. That's it on the main event. Let's go talk about the fascinating world of Indigo Technologies that you're dealing with. I've been watching you guys for a little while now. So let's go. What's next for John Lee? All right, John. Indigo Tech. I know it was started out by an Aussie or a Brit from I think it was MIT. I must have been here too long because I couldn't quite pick whether you're an Aussie or a Brit, which is obviously commonly done. What's the vision for Indigo Technology? Tell us about it.
It's exciting times for sure. So Professor Ian Hunter, a prolific inventor out of MIT, he really wants to make the world more sustainable from the electric vehicle perspective, and also more affordable and accessible. So the bigger vision is to say, how can we put a little micro factory in these shipping containers, these sort of standardized shipping containers, ship it anywhere in the world, and maybe 4 or 5 of these things together, you feed in the raw material. On the other side, you have a electric vehicle that's very affordable to all, that's also very sustainable. And so with that,
so the idea is to literally have a manufacturing line of 5 containers and then, okay, interesting.
Yeah. So it's as you sort of think about how we do need to move places, how do you make things affordable so that people can do what they need to do? So yeah. So with that, I mean, the idea is that, how do you make a vehicle more efficient? And the realization was to make it lightweight. And so by making it lightweight, you're able to squeeze more juice out of the battery and go further. Or the other way of looking at it is that I need a smaller battery pack to go the same range as another vehicle. But the challenge there is that a lightweight vehicle has a very uncomfortable ride. And so that's where active suspension comes in. And that's one of the core elements of our sort of development over these past few years.
What is active suspension?
So active suspension is really the ability to provide, there's a nice little video here, to provide a vertical force on the vehicle so that as you go over, let's say, uneven surfaces here, that your cabin maintains a level experience there. A little bit sort of choppy on my end here.
Yeah, it was a little. I think what it showed is a conventional where everybody's jumping around versus active suspension. It was just smooth despite the ground conditions.
Right, and here's a good example there, right? So you have that vertical force on the vehicle so that you can maintain the levelness of your cabin. And so it's much more, not only more comfortable, but you grip the road better. So the handling of the vehicle is better as well.
Yeah, got it. Okay, so where is Indigo Tech today? Where have you reached in terms of go-to-market?
So over the past few months, we've had some really exciting developments, everything from some really exciting potential OEM partnerships as well as customer relationships. So we'll be announcing those in the coming weeks, some fairly soon. The other side is that with any new technology, it takes time to develop. Another MIT invention, e-ink, a friend of mine that I sort of met through the alumni network, he was one of the inventors of the e-ink sort of technology, which is what you see in the tablets, the Nook reader, et cetera, the Kindle and all these sort of devices. It took over 10 years to really deliver that to a point where Sony and others started to take it and really start to build upon it. So it's a long technology adoption cycle. So the active suspension and things that we're working on, it's taken some time to get to where we are. And I think for the right part, because we want to be able to make sure it's safe, it's reliable, it's durable, and so on and so forth. And so we continue to build the vehicles to test this out and make sure that it really lasts and can deliver a good experience at the end of the day. So looking towards the end of the year, we're looking to also put a few more of these test vehicles on the road and even get it to a point where we'd like to do a road show around the US so that people can really experience these things firsthand and understand what active suspension really means.
Got it. So obviously you've been along this journey, you've made some mistakes, you've learned by them. What are some of the major challenges that you've overcome that has got you where you are today?
Yeah, I would say that the biggest challenge is how do you make a vehicle more lightweight? It's easy to add things on and things get heavy, but to go from the vehicle, automobile has been around for over 100 years and it's kind of evolved to the way it is for a certain reason. To then take that and say, okay, well, maybe we can go with a quarter of the weight. We can go with things that are sort of new methods of reducing the weight. But the key is that we want to make sure that things are extremely safe, because in the end, we are traveling these things and accidents happen. Hopefully with AI and sort of these machine learning and sort of we make these vehicles safer so they don't crash. But until that time or when things do happen, we want to make sure that the safety cell, the occupants, the cabin that the occupants are in are as safe as possible. So the challenge is how do you continue to evolve the concept of a lightweight vehicle in a safe manner. So and we'll continue to work on that. Yep.
So what I've seen like these little three-wheelers, which kind of leans into maybe micro mobility, especially with this I don't want to go on public transport demand that's emerged with the pandemic. And then equally, I've seen some larger, maybe minivan, SUV type of thing. So what are you trying to bring to market over the next few years?
Yeah. So the exciting thing is that as you think about our needs to get around, and there are studies which show that 90% or whatever vehicles on the road are single occupancy. That's why we have HOV lanes, for instance.
Yep.
And so combined with that desire to move around, the reality is that we're not bringing a load of stuff everywhere we go. It's maybe a laptop, maybe it's a bag of groceries, whatever. And so as you really focus on that user need to move yourself and maybe transport some items, the opportunity to really address and develop an experience around that is huge. As you then look at the business needs of vehicles, these sort of fleets, as you look at, let's say, house cleaning as a franchise, these are people who need to get to houses and maybe they carry a small thing of cleaning supplies with them. And the ability to develop a purpose-built solution to make it extremely affordable and efficient to do these jobs is one of the things we're working on as well. However, having said that, you do see that companies such as Amazon are needing to move lots of packages quickly. Everyone wants to have their stuff, you order it and then deliver to you within an hour. And so with that, there is the real sort of need to optimize delivery routes, optimize how much and how quickly people move packages around. And so obviously with a smaller vehicle, that's a little bit challenging. But as we go to a little larger vehicle, not the large trucks that you see all the time, because all the factors that come with that, all the challenges with that, but maybe something more on a sort of minivan, or what we're working on is a microvan, where you can still transport a lot of things very efficiently and get to these ideally sort of instant delivery type of models.
Got it. Okay, very good, very good. So when can we see you guys on the streets?
Well, we're already on the streets, but you have to kind of look for us in the Boston area where our office is located. But that's our prototype vehicles. I think that the real sort of rollout, we're looking to roll out some pilot sort of rental programs, probably in about a year and a half's time. We will have our prototype vehicles to continue to validate and develop really towards the end of this year into next year. So if you look around for us, we're there. Just gotta know where to be.
Yeah, got it. Okay, good. Thanks so much, John. Let's jump to the audience, see what questions we've had come in. Picking the first one. Doesn't direct power wheels create other maintenance issues? So yeah, the power is in individual wheels rather than a skateboard model or something similar. So doesn't that create more issues?
Actually, it would probably create less issues in the sense that we've continued to simplify. So before you have your electric motor in the body of the vehicle, then you need some sort of gearbox and sort of transmission and sort of axles and so on and so forth. We've put everything into the wheel. So we've further simplified. And in that process, the way we go about sealing the motor and everything else, we dunk it in water. It has to go through the elements the salt, the cold weather, etc., such that it actually becomes more reliable and less maintenance needed in the end. So actually direct power wheels are a benefit in that sense.
Interesting. Didn't expect that. Okay, next question. From Iman, how do you make micromobility vehicles cool?
In the end, it's really about the design, and I think that at least how I interpret cool to be is designing the brand, right? And so it really starts with understanding what is it that people really desire, and then how do you design towards that. It doesn't hurt to have some celebrity endorsements, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. Leveraging that, I understand. Okay, great. Next question. Iman again, what AI are you using in your vehicle?
So we, at the moment, do not have plans to throw in full self-driving, to borrow Elon's terminology there. But over time, we do have plans to put in both initially sort of driver assistance features so that we can protect you, making sure you have automatic emergency braking and these sort of things. And for sure, one of the sort of use cases that we're thinking about is that you arrive at an airport somewhere, you summon a vehicle, and it automatically drives from that vehicle in a low-speed situation to pick you up in front of the terminal, and then you can take off from there. So these technologies are become more and more readily available and affordable. So right now it's in the development process. So yeah.
Great. Good. Okay, I think we are there, John. Fabulous. Good to see you again. Thanks for giving us an enlightenment on the micromobility world and also the ever-challenging sustainability of EVs. Appreciate that. Thanks for coming on the show again.
Well, thanks for having the opportunity to share what we're doing and really the excitement around what EVs can bring. I'm looking forward to owning our own vehicle and driving around town. So
sounds good. Look forward to that. Good. Thanks again. See you soon, John. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, everyone. Next week, thanks to John. Next week, we are going to be looking at a fast becoming de facto design approach. We are going model-based systems engineering. Yes, deep into that system side of things in complex manufacturing with a deeply embedded, we'll call him a rocket scientist, if you will, but he's been doing a lot of work over in NASA over a period of time. So going to be really interested to learn about MBSE next week. Have a great week ahead. Thanks for joining us again. See you next Monday.